Welcome to Real Health with me, Carl Henry. Folks, today on the show, I'm joined by registered dietitian Aisling Geary, who works full-time within the NHS while also running her own clinic, AMG Nutrition. She's originally from Cork and now living in Edinburgh. She helps people move away from restrictive dieting and rethink their relationship with food. She joins me to discuss why calorie counting often fails, the importance of fibre and plant diversity, and how small mindset shifts can lead to lasting health change. Ashling, all the way from Edinburgh, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm all good. Very excited to be here.
So from Cork, living in Edinburgh, how did that happen? Tell us about that.
So studied here. So I did my undergrad in nutritional sciences in UCC. Was planning on doing my master's in dietetics there as well, but went traveling for the summer in between. So quick change, and I ended up studying my master's in dietetics over here, and then have been in the NHS since. So it's home for now, but not forever. I'd say back to Cork at some point.
Like as someone who's married to a Cork person, right? That's kind of the norm. Is that Cork people tend to go back to Cork? That's
Yeah.
the rule. Tell me about from studying dietetics and nutritional science. Why was that something you wanted to do?
I suppose from actually a very young age, I knew I wanted to do it, which is kind of unusual. So I suppose I always wanted to work with people in a caring role. From there, kind of was straight into nutrition and dietetics.
I suppose that's an aspect of your job. A lot of people don't think that dietitians actually do. They may think that it's purely weight management or it's sport specific. But actually that role within the NHS that you're working in now, it's a super important role because people don't know regards to certain conditions what to eat, what to not eat. And from a dietitian's perspective, it's great. It's very empowering to give people that advice.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, I suppose within my role in the NHS, my appointments with patients are an hour. So I do have that time to kind of build that rapport. I have that time to kind of explain what the condition is, go through and get to know them as well, which I think really, really helps, because I know with other kind of healthcare professionals, sometimes they're a little bit more rushed. So that's a huge thing as well. And giving that patient that time to feel listened to and understood as well.
And when it comes to, I suppose, weight management, what are the biggest challenges people face that you see in clinic?
So I suppose I see a huge variety of patients, to be honest, every day. But I think that the main thing is a lot of people know what a well-balanced diet looks like. They actually have a lot of information on I suppose what it is, but it's really challenging to implement that. And there's so many factors within our environment that make that harder to do. So I suppose it's, support with actually implementing that and implementing it longer term. And also, although we know what a balanced diet looks like, there is so much conflicting information out there. And I suppose especially with social media and everyone kind of feeling like there's some bit of an expert in diet and nutrition, there's always a new trendy food or a new diet to try, and that can kind of, I suppose, throw people off and feel like they should be doing that as well. So I suppose it's trying to bring that back to basics a lot of the time, and I suppose build the foundations, and then it's easier to kind of make more particular changes from there when needed.
Whenever we do an episode with a dietitian, people are always like, some of the questions about weight and what they advise. Like, so someone comes into you, what do you advise for them?
So I suppose as part of the initial assessment, it's a lot of information gathering. So kind of trying to go through their past medical history, kind of medications that they're on, any of those that are impacting their weight. I suppose a big, huge thing would be, what they've tried in the past before to manage their weight, how they're feeling about their weight, and actually what they want to get out of the input. Because I think, there can be a lot of stigma as well coming in to see a dietitian for support with weight management. And I suppose, I want to understand what the patient wants to get out of the appointment. So actually asking them, what your goals are, what are you hoping to get out of that, and getting them really, really clear on it. Because I suppose going on any weight loss journey is challenging, and there's going to be ups and downs. So I suppose having that strong why behind why you're wanting to make the changes can be helpful to kind of reference back to as we're going. And I suppose also I often kind of get them to do like a kind of timeline, I suppose, on their relationship with food and body image and their weight, and how that's adjusted over time. Because often, we can kind of go through the motions and maybe not take time to pause and reflect on things that haven't gone well or weren't supportive of us, and we can fall into that trap of trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. So I suppose from there, and in relation to the kind of dietary side of things, people are very disappointed at the first appointment, because the main thing that I would be looking at is the pattern of eating. And often people talk about going, I suppose, hungry at night time. I'm always snacking or mindless eating then, but then we look at the total day and they've skipped breakfast or they haven't had a proper lunch. So it's kind of getting the basics of regular eating in place, and then again from there it's so much easier to adjust what you're having in your meals once that regularity is in place.
So it's doing a lot of detective work. It's reviewing basically what has and hasn't worked for you in the past and trying to formulate a plan with the stuff that has worked for you in conjunction with, very baseline healthy eating.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, there is no magic wand, even though people feel like there is. I suppose it is those simple things, but it's actually being able to implement them consistently, not, I suppose, changing everything all at once for a few weeks and then kind of being on and off that trajectory for forever.
And of course, like any advice, whether it's for weight loss or whether it's for, management of a condition or a disease, behavior change is crucial to everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's my biggest role. Because often, I have patients coming in that have done so much research onto their own kind of specific condition where, they're coming to me asking about supplements that I actually haven't heard of. But I suppose what I'm kind of trying to do is really ask open-ended questions, again, kind of get them to kind of suggest changes that they could possibly make. And then I suppose it's just that little nudge in the right direction people often need where, again, they know what to do, but it's just how to do it. And it's kind of problem solving, often it's like, yeah, I could do this, but we're kind of trying to, I suppose, come up with answers for all of those buts together and things that are going to be realistic. And I think it's just individual, what works for me or for you might not work for someone else. And I think it's just bridging those gaps.
One of the things you talk about on your Instagram is calorie counting becoming a crutch and that can be an issue. I know calorie counting diets are still very trendy. There's a lot of VLC, very low calorie diets here that we are always kind of giving out about because they're not great. Talk to me about the issue around calorie counting from your perspective, that it becoming a crutch, becoming too obsessed about the calories that are going in and going out.
Yeah, so I suppose with calorie counting, I know I'm very strong-willed about that when I talk about it online. Like, I do definitely acknowledge for some people it can be helpful in the short term to kind of build information and build awareness on the energy content of foods, but it should only be used in the short term because I think what actually happens in reality is, people restrict their calorie intake and notice that they begin to lose weight, and what can happen there is, that can become addictive and the reduction continues to happen. And I think what we are sacrificing there when we're just focusing on the calories is the nutrient profile of the food. And again, going back to, when I be discussing with patients or clients about, why you're wanting to make these changes, it's often to feel healthier, look after my health long term. And when we're forgetting about that nutrient profile, we're not protecting that. So I suppose they have a place, but again, I really feel strongly that they should be used short term, and we need to think about, I suppose, the overall food matrix and the kind of nutrient density of the foods. And also, I suppose, how we digest foods as well is going to be different. If you have 100 calories of a chocolate bar, 100 calories of an avocado, the benefit that we're going to get from both of those is different. And it's not saying that the chocolate bar can't fit in. It absolutely can, but it shouldn't be an instead of, lowest calories and always the best option.
It's a great point that around banishing foods or seeing certain foods as sins or just eliminating foods totally. That's a problem within any wellness plan. If you try to do that, it doesn't work.
No. And I think it's that kind of labeling foods as good and bad, and the word sin there just sends me. But I
saw the eyes roll when I said it. I was like, I'm stirring her up now.
I was like, but I think it's that moral language that we're using around food, and of course, if you're telling yourself a food is bad and you're always going to say, I shouldn't have this, or I should avoid this, or I should only have this when, then eventually when you do have it, of course there's going to be guilt associated with that. You're not going to be able to enjoy the food, and that's where that kind of black or white or all or nothing thinking styles come in, where you're either completely on track and tracking everything and being so good, in quotation marks, whatever that means, And then I suppose when you have that food that you've told yourself you're not going to have, when that comes up at a birthday occasion or a celebration or whatever it is, it can derail people and kind of, I suppose, put that back on themselves where, I'm bad for having that, or I shouldn't have done that, or why did I do that? But actually, I'm always saying, there is no such thing as good or bad foods, and they all can fit into a well-balanced diet. It's just about how much and how often that we're having them.
And one thing you said, it's actually how I came across you, was there was reading an article that you did on the RT website around plant points being really important and focusing on plant points as opposed to calories. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's another thing, I suppose, I think it can be really helpful to shift that mindset away from, what you can take out of your diet to actually focusing on what you can add in, and then going back to that, focusing on our health longer term. It does actually really align. So plant points is a newer term. I think it's not to replace the 5 a day. It's kind of an addition to that, essentially. So it goes wider in what counts towards a plant point. So any plant-based food, essentially. So kind of all different types of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, lentils, legumes, chickpeas, whole grains, all count. And I suppose the idea behind it is all of these different varieties of plant foods will have different types or strains of fibers within them. We have an amazing ecosystem called our gut microbiome, which maybe people have heard of before. But within that, we have trillions of different microorganisms living within there. It's more unique than our fingerprint. And all of these different type of microorganisms will have different preferences and different preferences like we do ourselves. So we don't know exactly what they need. So the idea is kind of the more variety that we get in, the more likely we are to be meeting those requirements of them. And we know, I suppose, the role of the gut microbiome on so much more of our health. And I suppose research continues to evolve within that.
And how many points should we be aiming for each day?
So not specifically daily. What's recommended is 30 plant points across the week, which sounds overwhelming. And it does sound like a lot, especially when most of us aren't managing to get the 5 portions of fruit and veg in a day. But actually, when we break it down, it's not that overwhelming. So different to the 5 portions of fruit and veg in a day, where a portion is kind of clearly stated as 80 grams. Plant points, there's no defined portion that we need to have, and all different varieties count. So, if you have a handful of nuts at a snack, switching that from walnuts to a packet of mixed nuts would switch it from 1 to 4 plant points. All different colors of like peppers or tomatoes would also count. So it's more so helpful to think about, how can I vary things up? Trying new recipes. Herbs and spices also count. Olive oil and dark chocolate also count towards it. So there is so much, and I think it's, these health promoting foods that we can have more of are actually what make a difference long term. And I think it's, a fun way of thinking about it. And I suppose a helpful place to start might be just even monitoring your current kind of intake at the moment, without changing anything, and gradually building that up over time.
This year's kind of trends, you'll hate this, but that fiber maxing idea, it's everywhere, right? It's very trendy.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted that people are talking more about fiber. We know that only 4% are actually meeting our fiber requirements of 30 grams in a day. And I suppose when people think about fiber, maybe previously it was thought to kind of stimulate regular bowel movements or reduce constipation. But I suppose now we know with the role in kind of the gut microbiome, that it plays so much more roles beyond that. With the kind of concept of fiber maxing, I have kind of seen that as well. And I suppose with fiber, because it is very hard for us to digest, it's really important that we actually increase that gradually over time. So, if you're normally having about 16 grams a day, which is kind of the national average, you going up to 30 grams next week, you are going to have bloating, you are going to have discomfort. It may impact your stools.
I tried that. We interviewed Rhiannon Lambert. She's a book about fibre out, and I would have plenty of fibre in my diet anyway. But for the crack, I bought butter beans and I threw them into a stir fry, and I think I put 2 or 3 tins of butter beans in. And it was very uncomfortable for a couple of days. You don't feel great.
Yeah,
slowly increasing it is important.
Yeah. Definitely, because I suppose in the digestion process of it, we do produce gas. So I suppose, yeah, like you said, it's kind of increase it by one portion at a time. I would say, and when you are making sure that you are increasing your fluid intake along with that to help kind of stimulate the bowel movement and allow the stool to soften.
Talk to me about online content then. You mentioned at the start of our interview, any dietitian we bring on is always very passionate about what they do, but also very passionate about what they see online and the myths that they want to get a chance to debunk. So we always give them the chance to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose with me, I'm very lucky. The side of the internet I'm on, it's quite positive. So maybe I miss out on a lot of the myths. But I think one of the biggest things is, superfoods. Only eat this, don't eat that. And I think they're just, it's kind of, what I eat in a day videos. If you follow this, you'll look like me. And all of these things are just so unhelpful. Research done by UCD showed that only 2% of nutrition advice on TikTok is accurate, which is insane.
2%?
Yeah, it's 2.2% or something. Yeah, crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and people can say stuff. Sorry.
No, you're fine, go on.
I was going to say people can say stuff with such conviction that you're like, God, that must be true. But I'd always say, have your detective hat on. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Making sure you're following, I suppose, reputable sources as well, looking for registration. The BDA website is also kind of quite a helpful place to go to if you're kind of a bit confused.
I think your point about the overconfident presenting is a really good one. That's generally a red flag for me, no matter what I'm looking at, whether it's cars or whether it's fitness or health or food. When someone's overly confident or overly aggressive in front of the camera, it's generally a red flag that they're covering for the fact that they haven't got a whole lot of qualifications behind them.
Yeah. And I think as well, it often I suppose picks out one certain food about, being a superfood or a food that we need to take out. And there's no one food that's going to make or break your health. And if there was, we would all know about it and it would be common knowledge. So like you said, kind of putting that detective hat on and being curious.
For anyone listening in who knows that they need to make changes but feel overwhelmed by the thought of that, what do you say to them? Because it's, there are so many people out there who are incredibly busy. They might have kids, they might have a big commute, they're stressed out about the fuel crisis, the cost of the wind, whatever. And despite the fact that they know they need to make the changes, they're just too overwhelmed to take it on. What do you say to people like that?
Start small. I suppose the smallest step that you can take and show yourself that you can do it. We do get a little bit of a dopamine response from achieving something that we've set out to do. So instead of being like, I have to have 3 perfectly balanced meals and stacks every single day, it's thinking about what is realistic for you. So maybe that's focusing on one meal at a time. I really think having a power hour at the weekend is really helpful to kind of prep some things for the week ahead, whether that's kind of chopping up vegetables, maybe making a stew with adding in your butter beans and chickpeas and things like that to make the week go easier. Also, I think having a few recipes that I can put these together in 10 minutes and having a reservoir of those, whether that's having frozen baked potatoes and microwaving a tin of beans or a quick stir fry. It's having those things that are easy accessible. And I think it's, we can really complicate nutrition and make it feel like it is this huge overwhelming thing. But I think if we just take a step back and, go back to the basics of regular balanced meals, thinking about adding in a source of protein, thinking about choosing higher fiber options and just being able to slow down and eat mindfully, chewing our food and allowing ourselves to enjoy it as well.
Great tips and great content. If people want to follow you or book in to see you, where can they find you?
Thanks so much. So amgnutrition.com and also you can find me at AMG Nutrition on TikTok or Instagram. So thanks so much for having me, Carl.
It's been great to have you on, and listen, the best luck in Edinburgh. I'm sure I'll bump into you in Cork at some stage in the near future. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Carl Henry. As ever, you know where we are, at Carl Henry PT on Instagram, realhealth.independent.ie and on the Irish Independent website. I'll see you next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.